All right, welcome to a demo of FusionAuth. We're now on version 1.45.1, and we're going to walk through some of the functionality that you get with using FusionAuth as your customer identity and access platform. So what we've looked at here is our WebAuthn implementation. I've already authenticated previously with my password and email, but now I can use biometrics. So this works whether it's a fingerprint, your Face ID on a mobile device. We also support YubiKeys. So some of the freshness that you get out of the box. We do still support a regular credential login even when this is done. So this is one version of Passwordless. We can see that I actually have Google One Tap turned on here. So this is Google as an IDP, being able to log in with my Gmail account, and I'm authenticated just as I would be if I had logged in with any of the other methods. We do have some additional passwordless options available. So we're going to update the FusionAuth application here. And if I wanted to enable passwordless for magic links, I could simply toggle that on, log back out, and then return to normal login again. And then here we have this login with magic link, which would collect an email. And then I could enter that in and send myself an email. You get the same response regardless of if the user exists or not. And then if we wanted to look quickly at what that template may look like, here we go. Click the link. It's asking me to set up WebAuthn because I haven't yet for this account. We'll not do that now, but then you can see that I'm authenticated just the same. So going back to the Google IDP, what's cool about using these identity providers is that we have what's called Lambdas that run within those workflows. We also have the ability to set up really any number of OIDC or SAML connections. So you can see that I have some configured here already, but I can set up more. I can set up other social providers. We have quite a few gaming platforms as customers. And so you'll see Nintendo, Steam, Xbox, Twitch, those are, more focused on customer profile, but the ability to have any number of enterprise connections. And if you don't see one there you like, as long as they're following those open standards, you can more than easily set up one of those. So let's look at an OIDC configuration. You'll get this from the IDP that you're setting up, and then this reconcile Lambda. So let's go look at this Lambda. What this does is actually run some inline JavaScript that allows you to reconcile attributes out of your IDP that you maybe want on your user in FusionAuth. So here we see that the token coming back from this OIDC provider has given name, middle name, family name, and so on, and we're able to add these to the user object in FusionAuth. We even have a user.data field that allows you to put any custom data that doesn't directly map into something that exists in FusionAuth already. So that's actually reconciling coming from an OIDC provider. Same thing for SAML, has a reconcile Lambda that runs code as well. We can just look at that code real quick. So pretty straightforward. Every flavor of SAML is a little different, so make sure that you are aware of what you're working with. And then what I think is really powerful is this ability to do a fetch within a Lambda. So you can actually API call out back into FusionAuth to get other attributes or auth-z details for a user. Maybe you store something in a CRM system and you need to grab the details there. The fetch functionality allows you to do that. And what we're looking at here is actually a populate Lambda versus a reconcile Lambda. So this populate Lambda will allow you to populate custom claims on the JSON web token, the JOT that you get downstream at your application signed by FusionAuth. So you can see the custom claim being added here. Again, that's that custom data object. We've got a favorite color value in there. So to assign that to this custom claim on the token, we'll simply write this line of code here, and then that we can expect on the JOT coming out of FusionAuth. So that's really the user flows, if you will, the user experience of logging into FusionAuth. Now I'd like to touch on the data model of FusionAuth. So FusionAuth is by default in FusionAuth Cloud a single tenant solution. So you have dedicated infrastructure. If you're in our high availability, it's 3-node cluster with full database replication, and really anything above that for increasing the number of nodes, increasing the size of your infrastructure, to having custom DR plans that are multi-region. We will work with you to provide what's needed to support your use cases. And then within that single tenant that's physically isolated, you can actually do row level logical isolation. So multi-tenancy within a single instance of FusionAuth, totally possible. What this does is isolates your applications, users, and groups to that single tenant, and there's no cross-tenant access. And this gives you some controls over theming at that tenant level, that you want to have all of the application entry points specific with a certain theme. You can also control multi-factor, so not just the methods that are available, but also whether or not it's required. We can set a user to have to not only do MFA when they log in, but also require them to go set it up and then perform the MFA challenge if they have not enacted that already. So you do have some other configurations here, password policies as far as your complexity settings. If you're going to set up breach password protection, we also have what we call advanced threat detection, which is a location aware set of features that can help prevent account takeovers. So stopping things via, impossible travel calculations. You've got IP access control lists. You've got the ability to block domains, and then you have the ability to more granularly control some rate limiting on some of these user actions where, maybe that you're getting DDoSed or brute force. You can have some control over stopping those attacks. So there's a lot of nerd knobs in here. We'll not go over all of them today. Just know a lot of this is this top level configuration. Next one down is applications. These are your entry points, and these actually inherit a lot of these tenant level configurations, but also allow you to configure different settings so you can overwrite kind of what's being inherited from the tenant. And so here we're looking at the OAuth configuration. This is where you set up the grants that you're going to accept, your redirect behavior, your single sign-on behavior, what happens when you log out. All of that can be configured here. If you're requiring a Pixie challenge, things of that nature are going to be handled in this page here. And then as you can see, some of the overriding of those tenant level settings can be done at this application level. One I do want to point out here is just the tokens. So we've got the token behavior and your populate lambdas that can be set up here to populate that certain authorization details that you want for this specific application. Where this can be really powerful is if you have two applications. We've got one customer, they're a fantasy football application or fantasy gaming. They need as frictionless a login experience as possible. And then the other side of that is a gambling application. So they do want to support SSO, but they absolutely need to have a higher kind of security framework around that gambling app, because you're collecting more identity information about the user, you're collecting payment details, and money can be going back and forth. So it's really important to have that a little more locked down on that side. And this is one of those options that can help you do that, as well as changing what your MFA policies are at that application level. So a really powerful tool to increase the MFA challenge requirement on one specific application. So we also support self-service registration. So if you have users coming to your site and they're going to register, we can turn on self-service registration here and either have a basic form or a custom form that we've built. The number of steps and the number of attributes that we're collecting, entirely up to us. We don't have to use anything pre-made. We're completely customizable in that regard. We can show you an example in the wild here in a bit. If I wanted to turn on that passwordless, this is what we looked at previously. So being able to toggle this on and off. And again, lots of nerd knobs here, but this covers, I would say, 80% of use cases of users wanting to log into your services. So then we have users. So user is just a FusionAuth identity. This is back thinking about multi-tenancy. You can have human with an identity in each tenant, and to FusionAuth, those are completely distinct users, unrelated to each other, even though on the client, it potentially is the same individual. So here we have registrations. The registration is how we tie a user to an application and what access they have. You can see here in the roles, so handling role-based access controls. We can also use groups to not just group users together, but also automatically provision those roles. So if we wanted to add Aaron here to, let's say, an admin group, we can submit this, and then we go back to registrations, and we can see that that admin role has now been automatically provisioned to Aaron for Cool Game. And then here's that user.data. So this is any custom fields that you want to put in here. It's just a JSON object. You can really put complex data structures in here, and as long as they're consistent across the user base, FusionAuth will actually set up, index these with Elasticsearch to increase, analytics that you may want to do later, or just lookups on your users. Just a really powerful tool, knowing that whatever you put in here can be leveraged later. So let's look at FusionAuth in the wild. So this is one of our gaming customers, private division. They're a studio part of Take-Two. They have used our hosted pages. Obviously, branding is very important here. Lots of cool images in the gaming space. And when we click sign in here, we're actually using OAuth redirected to a FusionAuth hosted page. And when we say FusionAuth hosted page, this is really just pre-built pages that we have built for you. And you bring CSS, HTML, and JavaScript into this. All of this that we're looking at is FusionAuth code. And you get things like forgot password, your MFA flows, your WebAuthn flows, these identity providers that you want. Gaming, they're going to have those gaming providers. All of this is already built for you. If you assigned one of those self-service registration forms, you're going to see that here. A user being able to click, enter their birth date, and then move through the process, whether that's consents or other attributes, or maybe you have 3, 4, and 5 pages. We had one customer that majority of their use case was on mobile, and so they did, collected one field per step, and that was just a really efficient way for the users to use the registration, but also because keyboard, knowing that that's going to take up some segment of the screen, not having the need or requirement to scroll down in order to keep filling out fields. So just a good example there of customizations, all of that available here in the UI. I do want to call out that FusionAuth is a truly API first application. So you have the ability to leverage the hosted pages, but you also have the ability to do a completely native login that you call the APIs directly. You handle all of the tokens yourself. That's totally possible. But also as far as configuration and setup, you have the ability to do everything that we've clicked through here with an API instead of the UI. And some of these, like you can see with this user.data, this is not going to be updated in the UI here. There are ways to add these fields to forms and collect information on the user that way. But for the most part, this is one of those, if we click edit here, let's see, there's some custom fields down here that can be added or changed, but you can do these via API as well.